How's everybody doing out there? I said, how's everybody doing out there? All right, it's golf season. Can you believe it? All right, welcome to the Section 1 Golf Coaches Association Rules Clinic. We've been doing this for a few years. We've been fortunate enough to have the Met PGA run this for us. If you have a cell phone now, I'm going to ask you to turn it off. I expect, like your coaches expect, you guys are going to behave and you're going to give them your undivided attention. Okay, if I have to speak to you, I'll speak to you once. The second time, I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay, so we want to give these guys our undivided attention. This is Dan from the Met PGA. We're going to welcome him. And before he starts, we'd like to thank Hen Hut and the Sailors for giving us this facility. It looks like a nice place, and I want to give them a round of applause. Dan, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Ray. It's a true pleasure and honor to be here year after year. By a quick show of hands, how many golfers here are members of the Met PGA Junior Tour? I certainly do not see enough hands. I would just want to take this opportunity for a minute to talk a little bit about the Met PGA and the programs that we offer. We are a junior golf tour, and we run over 120 tournaments between the end of June and the end of August, all throughout the metropolitan section, which includes parts of Westchester, Long Island, lower parts of upstate New York, Rockland County, etc. And it is a tremendous opportunity for you to get involved and to be able to continue playing competitively outside of your high schools. And we pride ourselves in being a learning tour. So just because you hear the word junior tour and PGA, don't be intimidated at all. We have kids of all different levels and skills out there. And I guarantee you that if you're playing for your high school team, you are certainly more than eligible to be playing on the junior tour. So definitely consider it. We had some pamphlets here today. Hopefully you guys picked them up while you were signing in back there. And again, want to welcome everyone. Who here considers themselves to be an expert on the rules of golf? No hands, no takers? I certainly don't consider myself to be an expert either. I actually, just this past weekend, went to the USGA Rules of Golf Workshop. The USGA are the people who write the rules book that you have in your hands now. And they certainly don't make it easy for us. It's dry. But one of the coolest things about golf that you don't see in any other sport is that you are your own referee. There's no umpire like in baseball. There's no one out there like in soccer. It's you. So you are the one responsible for calling a penalty on yourself out there, and to thine own self be true. And that's, to me, one of the many things that makes golf as majestic and incredible as it is. And we're going to go through a couple of the key rules today. I want to keep this as interactive as possible, so if anyone has any questions at any point, comments, concerns, wants to share a story, by all means, please raise your hand, and let's make this as fun as possible, all right, guys? That's right. So the first slide's a little bit of clip art. It's a guy holding the rules book, and it says, that book is the real hazard, and it's the truth. You know, it's the rules of golf that get everyone into trouble because it's not so cut and dry, is it? So let's start with a simple principle of holing out. In principle, the ball that is teed off with must be the ball played into the hole. Otherwise, the player could be disqualified. So that means when you tee off with a ball on the hole, that's the same ball that you need to hole out with. It can only be changed between holes, but make sure that you announce it to your fellow competitors. Otherwise, it's a two-stroke penalty. And there's a ball getting ready to go in the hole. Hopefully, it's the same one that the player teed off with. Playing the ball as it lies. The principle of the game of golf says if a rule does not allow anything else, you should not touch the ball between the tee and the green. Play the ball as it lies. Or if its lie has been unintentionally changed, it should be placed as it lay when it came to rest. Play the course as you find it. If you play the ball as it lies, it becomes a lot harder to do anything wrong unless the ball is out of bounds on the wrong green or in an area where playing is not permitted as stated in the local rules. For example, ground under repair, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and environmentally sensitive areas. So you guys see that there's a ball on this alligator here. Who thinks that the player needs to play the ball off the alligator? Any hands of people that say that the ball does not need to be hit off the alligator? Let's see some more hands. Come on, guys, because that's the correct answer. Although it's a little more complicated because it's an alligator and it's a dangerous situation, if an outside agency, like another animal, which we'll get to a little bit later, moves your golf ball, you have the right to, your ball that's at rest, you can put it back to where it was, where it came to rest. This is probably the most important rule I'm going to talk with you about today, and it's in the rules book known as doubt as to procedure. So if you're not sure how to proceed and can't decide between two courses of action, you can play two balls. You must inform your fellow competitors which of the two balls is to count in the event that both options conform to the rules, and then play both balls until you've holed out. Note down both scores. Upon completion of the round, you must clarify the matter with the committee before signing and handing in your scorecard. Now, does everyone understand what that means? I'll take that as a no. So let's say your ball is in ground under repair, and you don't know what ground under repair is, but you came to the Met PGA rule seminar, and you're thinking in your head, I kind of remember that guy Dan talking about something, like maybe I get relief, but I don't know if I get relief. I think I'm going to play two balls. So I want to take relief from the ground under repair, but I'm not sure if I can. So what you do is you declare which ball you'd want to play. You play both balls. You play the ball that's in the ground under repair as well as one that you would drop. And then when you finish your round, it is imperative that you go to the committee, which in this case would be your coaches, to let them know what you did and to review the rule with you and make sure that you did the correct procedure. In the case of ground under repair, if you wanted to take a drop from ground under repair, you would be entitled to in your nearest point of relief. Preparation on the first tee. Make sure you always mark your golf ball with a Sharpie or similar marking pen so you are able to identify it without a doubt. Now, how many things do you think are repeated in the rules book? Do you think that they repeat a lot of information over and over, or do you think that they do say a lot of different things in there? A little bit of both? Very rarely are rules repeated in the rules book. You'll find numerous times the rules book instructing you to make sure that your ball is marked. There's a lot of Titleist 2s out there. If there's a good chance that you're going to be playing on the golf course with someone else who's playing with a Titleist 2. Make sure that you have a mark on it so you know what your Titleist 2 is versus what your either teammate or fellow competitor has. Make sure you read the rule sheet or any local rules. I'm not sure if you guys get rule sheets in your high school matches, but what I can tell you is there is information on there that I can guarantee you that you're not certain about. Make sure you go over it, and it could be to your benefit. Yes? So we're going to get to wrong ball a little bit later, but just so if you do hit a wrong ball, it's a two-stroke penalty, and you must go back and play your original ball. If you don't go back and play your original ball, the penalty for that is disqualification. And if you've hit someone else's ball that's in your group, that ball has to be replaced, but at no penalty to that competitor. If they hit your balls, then they incur the two-stroke penalty as well. All right. You play it from where it originally lied. So if you didn't make a stroke from that spot where they hit your ball, then you have to go back to that spot exactly. And failure to do so, and if you finish out the hole and tee off on the next tee, that would be disqualification. If you complete the hole and realize the error, then it's only a two-stroke penalty, and any of the strokes made with the wrong ball do not count. All right? Any questions on that? We're going to hit that a little bit more as we go on. So before I go over this one, I know the answer is here, but how many clubs are you allowed to have in your golf bag? Very good. At least you guys know how to read. That's good to know. A maximum of 14 clubs are allowed. If you've brought too many, you must remove the extra clubs from your bag before beginning your round. If you notice that you have too many clubs after starting your round, you must immediately declare which club you want to be put out of play, and you are no longer permitted to use them. So if you have 17 clubs, that means that 3 of them need to be considered out of play, and you're incurred a 2-stroke penalty for every hole that you had the extra clubs in your bag, with a maximum of 4-stroke penalty. So the most that can affect you is by 4 strokes. You are not permitted to borrow a club from another player on the course in order to play a stroke with it. I believe that this is probably true, even though you guys are on the same team. I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, coaches, but you're not allowed to share clubs with your teammates that you're playing with. Yes.
So let's say you have 17 clubs in your bag.
Uh-huh.
Before you start the round,
Mm-hmm.
you declare those clubs that you're not going to use them.
Yes. Yes. Usually what you do is you turn them upside down in your bag. That's a good way, just so there's no questions asked and no one's concerned that you might be using them. If you deem them out of play before you tee off and it's gone over with your fellow competitors, then it's not an issue. Yes. Well, it depends on the tournament you're in. You know, those guys playing on the PGA Tour week after week, you better believe that their officials on that first tee or 10th tee, wherever they're teeing off from, checking to make sure that they have 14 clubs in their bag. Now, in this case, probably there's not going to be anyone checking, but like we talked about before, in golf, you're your own referee, so it's really important to make sure that you, of course, an honest mistake could be made. You know, you want to try 2 different putters, you're not sure, you've been putting a little bad with your putter recently, so you went to go practice with a new putter and you put both of them in your bag, and completely unintentionally you left the one you didn't want to use in your bag. Unfortunately, that's a penalty, 2 strokes. So the honor system. On the first tee, the order of play is taken from the order in which the starter, which I guess in this case would be your coaches, instruct you. On the following tees, the person who had the lowest score on the previous hole has the honor to tee off first. If a player tees off out of turn, who can tell me what the penalty is? Who said none? You got to get a prize later. That's correct. I need you guys got to be better readers. It's right up on the screen for you. I wasn't trying to hide anything. Oh. So, don't worry. There's plenty of prizes for everyone, so don't worry. I guarantee you no one's leaving here empty-handed today. All right, guys, just bear with me. Come on. We're trying to make this as interesting as possible, and, you know, coming into this today, we're going to be going over a lot of information in a very short amount of time. To me, if you could take away 2 or 3 rules that you weren't 100% certain on before, then we've done our job today. So just really, you don't have to learn everything and walk away from here today learning every bit of information in the rules book, but really try to at least grasp 2 or 3 things that you didn't know before. All right, so the teeing ground. The teeing ground extends from the tee markers 2 club lengths behind the markers. The ball must be teed up within this area. However, the player can take up his stance outside of it. So we see here there's a diagram and the ball's within the teeing marker. Let's say that the player's feet were in the dark green area, either on the left or right of it. Would they still, and the ball was in that same place, would they be within the teeing ground? Very good. All right, you guys are getting it. A ball is outside of the teeing ground when the entire ball is outside of the teeing ground. So if your ball is just on the cusp right in the front on that line, then it is still considered in the teeing ground. As we can see here, this lady's ball does not look like it's in the teeing ground. Playing from outside the teeing ground. If a player tees from outside the teeing ground, even if the player is further back and would not gain an advantage, the stroke does not count, and the player incurs a 2-stroke penalty. The player has to rectify the mistake by teeing off within the teeing ground and is hitting their 3rd stroke. So that means if you tee it up 30 feet behind the tee markers and there's no advantage or anything, and it's not within 2 club lengths of those tee markers, then that ball still does not count. It is not in play, and you must go and re-tee from within the teeing ground. If the mistake is not rectified, the player will be disqualified. As you can see that little cartoon there, the guy is saying, we do not tee off in front of the markers, and that poor guy is hitting his second shot. He obviously didn't hit a very good first one. Tee markers, they come in all shapes and sizes, as we can see there, and colors. Before teeing off, the tee markers are classified as fixed objects and may not be moved. So if you guys are teeing off, you can't move the tee marker if you think it's in the way of your stroke. If they are moved, it's a 2-stroke penalty. Once you've teed off, if the tee marker is in your way from that point, then it's classified as a movable obstruction and can be moved without penalty. Relief on the tee. Uneven ground on the tee can be smoothed out, and you can even pull up grass. All loose objects which disturb you in any way, whether they are natural or artificial, except for the tee markers, can be removed without penalty. So if I went behind the tee and I took my driver, and instead of using a tee, I started banging on the ground to sort of elevate the grass a little bit, and I make a little tuft, and I put my ball there within 2 club lengths of the tee markers, is my ball in play? Does that count as teeing it up, or am I not allowed to do that? You are allowed to do that? Very good. Awesome. Now, if your ball falls off the tee, there's no penalty. You can just tee it up right again. However, if you make an attempted stroke at the ball and you whiff it, that counts. So although you're not penalized, you'd be hitting your second shot. Advice and line of play. So throughout this presentation, in a couple different scenarios, we're going to be talking about advice. It's a little bit different because you guys are playing individual stroke competition as well as a team competition, and I think in a lot of circumstances, you guys are able to help each other out, those who are on the same team, whether it's helping to line up putts, things like that. But this is going over more of what it would be like if you were playing in an individual stroke competition. So you're allowed to discuss distances with anyone. If you want to ask one of your fellow competitors or opponents how far you are from the hole, you're more than welcome to do that because that's just general knowledge. The position of hazards out of bounds, where the pin is, all of that good stuff, you're more than welcome to ask someone. You are not allowed to ask competitors or opponents advice. You can't ask them what club to hit. You can't ask them if you should hit a club like a 5-iron. That's a 2-stroke penalty, and a player who receives unsolicited advice is actually not penalized. So if you go if you go ask someone a question and you say, hey, what club should I hit there? And your opponent says to you, you should hit a 4-iron, then you're both actually penalized under the advice rule. But if you go over to your opponent and say, what club do you think I should hit there? And they don't respond, your opponent would not be penalized. Here's Ernie Els and Nick Price playing together. What club are you going to use on this hole? I'm hitting a 4-iron. So which of them would be penalized? Very good. I thought we said we had no experts in here. I think we got... We're getting there, guys. You guys are going to be teaching me pretty soon. So I think one of the most important things I'm going to teach you guys about today is a provisional ball. If you suspect that you will not be able to find your ball or that it is landed out of bounds, you should play a provisional ball. Make sure to announce that it is a provisional ball. That's key. If you just hit a provisional ball with the intent of hitting a provisional ball without telling your fellow competitors and teammates that you're doing such, guess what? Can anyone tell me what happens? Well, it's not a penalty, but the ball that you originally hit is no longer in play. So it's basically a lost ball if you don't declare that you're hitting a provisional. Make sure that you identify your provisional ball with specific markings. You don't want to hit the same ball as the original ball that you hit. And if you only have a certain number of golf ball, then you want to make sure that your identifying mark is different. Because if you can't identify which is your golf ball, which one you hit first, and which one's your provisional, guess what? Both of them are lost balls. Then you're in really big trouble. If your ball has landed in a water hazard, are you allowed to play a provisional ball? Very good. Also, while you're on the tee, you are welcome to chip and putt as long as you are not holding up the group behind you and that you're waiting on the tee. Coaches might be angry with me for letting you know that rule, but to be honest, only in situations where you're not going to be holding anyone up and you're waiting are you allowed to practice. I recommend not practicing as much as you can when you're out on the course, just because you want to make sure you're keeping up with pace of play, and it's very easy to fall behind. So down here we have and I'll get to your question in 1 second. We have someone saying, I'm going to hit another. Is that a proper way to identify that you're hitting a provisional ball? How many people think yes? Raise your hand. How many people think no? If you said no, you're correct. You have to say that you are hitting a provisional ball. Saying I'm hitting another is declaring your ball lost. The word provisional ball must be used. So now we're going to move on from the tee box and go to the middle of the course, if you will, fairway and rough. So the term through the green, which you'll probably hear a lot if you play in tournaments, includes everything fairway and all areas of semi-rough, rough, and fringe, plus all other teeing grounds as well as other greens which do not belong to the hole that you are playing. Playing in the wrong order. It is always the turn of the player whose ball is farthest from the hole. What's the penalty if you hit a shot and you are not the one farthest from the hole? Heard disqualification. That's kind of rough out there. I'm glad you're not writing the rules. No penalty is correct. All right. We'll get to prizes later. Don't worry, guys. There's going to be a huge Q&A, and no one will leave here empty-handed. See those boxes? They're filled to the hilt. You guys are going to leave here happy. So, guys, come on. So, two balls that are close to each other obstruct each other. Do you have to play the balls as they lie if they're this close to each other in the fairway or rough? If you said no, you're correct. The person who's farther away is allowed to mark their ball while the other person takes their stroke, whether it's your teammate or a fellow competitor, and then they're allowed to place their ball back once that shot has been played. Are you allowed to clean your ball in this instance? Very good. Do we have a prize for this guy? Do we got a prize? Just to see what yep. What was the answer? That the answer, if you did not hear it, was you're only allowed to clean the ball to identify that it is your golf ball. Did you have a question before? Sorry, 1 sec, we'll get.
Oh, yeah. So you hit a shot and you think it might be a hazard, but you're not sure.
So when it comes to hazards, there's a term that's called virtually certain. You have to be just about 100% sure that it went in the hazard to be able to drop from a hazard. So if you're not virtually certain, then unfortunately you are not entitled to hit a provisional. And if you don't end up finding your ball, one of your options is to go back to the spot where you last played from. Yes, in the back. Mm-hmm. I believe that you'd be allowed to move it just next to that spot because you want to recreate the lie as close as possible to the one you originally had. No problem. Yes. Well, we're going to get to this a little bit later, but the only real time limit in golf, I mean, obviously there's pace of play, but the only specific thing that's in the rules book is once you hit your shot and begin search for it, you only have 5 minutes to find your golf ball. After 5 minutes, and we'll get to this more later, after the 5-minute search, then the ball is declared lost. All right, embedded ball. If your balls become embedded into the ground upon landing, you are allowed to pick it up, clean it, and let it drop next to the spot without penalty. So here we have a little diagram of what an embedded ball is versus what an embedded ball is not. So if your ball is just in thick rough, then it is not embedded. It has to actually break the surface of the ground. Looking for a ball. You're a couple slides ahead of me, see? You have a maximum of 5 minutes to find your ball. After this time is run out, the ball is classified as lost, and you have to return to the spot where your last stroke was played from, or tee it up on the teeing ground, incurring a penalty of 1 stroke in distance. Yes. Yeah, no problem. Well, I think that you could. I think that in the rules book, it's fairway and areas that are closely mown, but there are local rules that different associations and depending on how bad it's going to be out there, and I imagine it's going to be pretty bad. We all know how brutal this winter has been. You are entitled to make a local rule as the committee that the embedded ball rule is effect through the green, which would also include the rough. Well, winter rules really isn't in the rules book. It's more of something that's been created because, yes. So to answer your question, if you're playing winter rules and your ball's embedded, then you'd probably just proceed in a similar manner that you would to your ball being embedded. Yep.
Winter rules is kind of like a slang terminology for what we call a local rule called preferred lies, which is when the committee wants to allow you to mark, lift, clean, and place within 1 club length because of conditions, course conditions, which I don't know if you guys elect to do that or not, but just to keep in mind, that would be a by local rule, and I'm sure that would be something that would be pretty explicit before you teed off. They would let you know this is how we're going to play today. What Dan was just describing, Rule 25.2 is the embedded ball rule. In the rules of golf, that is always in effect in the closely mown areas, which we know is what? What does that mean when I say closely mown area? The fairway, right. So embedded ball rule, you can always lift, clean it, and drop as near as possible to the spot where it was embedded if your ball's in the fairway. By local rule, you can say that same rule is in effect everywhere through the green, which includes fringes and roughs, etc. And then in addition to that, if you elect to play preferred lies, it's usually that is just in the closely mown areas, and that's, for us anyway, it's always 1 club length, lift, clean, and place. But again, anything beyond the embedded ball rule in the fairway, you better have had somebody explain, hey, this is how we're playing today. Embedded ball rules is in effect through the green, or we're playing preferred lies in closely mown areas. Otherwise, it's just the embedded ball rule in the fairway. If it's, again, if we're not playing preferred lies, if it's just the embedded ball rule in the fairway, it's going to be lift, clean, and drop. And when you're dropping it, it's as closely as possible to the spot where it was embedded. I tell people, you're almost trying to drop it right back into that same hole that it was in. What happens if it does end up back in the same hole? There's a rule that's going to tell us we're going to redrop, but so long as it doesn't, that's the procedure that you're supposed to follow.
Thank you.
Everyone, let's give a big round of applause for Jeff Voorhees. I'm going to brag on him for a minute. He has been recognized by the USGA, who writes the rules of golf, for knowing the rules at the highest level possible. So we're very fortunate to have him at the Met PGA. He's the tournament director, and he's my support system here today. So he's a tremendous asset to us. Well, you're not allowed to repair it before you drop it. Not until after the shot's been played. Right, because it potentially could improve your line of play. Uh-huh. Well, if you find your original ball within 5 minutes, then that's the ball in play. If you don't find it within the 5 minutes and you hit a provisional ball, then the provisional ball becomes your ball that's in play. All right, no problem. So, any more questions on embedded ball? Because as Ray was saying, that is going to be an important one. The courses are pretty wet out there. Okay. So, identifying the ball. If you cannot tell whether the ball found is yours, you are allowed to mark it and pick it up for identification. However, before doing so, you must inform your fellow competitors or opponents of this and give them the opportunity to observe the procedure. Otherwise, you'll incur a one-stroke penalty. So that's very important. If you're not sure it's your golf ball, you can't just mark it and pick it up and be like, oh, this is mine, this is fine. You have to make sure that your fellow competitors or opponents in your group know what you're doing. If necessary, as we were talking about before, you are allowed to clean the ball, but just for identification purposes, and then the ball is to be put back in the exact same spot. So you recreate the lie if necessary. Ball moved during search. Well, I guess everyone here is playing golf in the spring, but there are also a lot of high schools that play golf in the fall, and I'm sure they have a lot of problems with leaves falling off the trees. If you're searching for a ball and you unintentionally move it, you must put your ball back, and unfortunately, you receive a one-stroke penalty. There's no penalty if you are searching for an abnormal ground condition in an obstruction. We'll get to that later. But if you put it back, you'll be playing from if you don't put it back, rather, after you've moved your ball in search, then that's classified as playing in a wrong place, and that's an additional stroke penalty for a total of 2 strokes. And the ball must also be put back if a fellow competitor or opponent moves it, but this does not incur a penalty. So only if you move your own golf ball, not if one of your fellow competitors or opponents moves it unintentionally. So ball moved when taking a practice swing. If you take a practice swing and accidentally move your ball in doing so, this does not count as a stroke. But the ball, once again, we'll see this, there's a lot of repetition in the rules. The ball has to be put back, and failure to do so would be playing from a wrong place again, and that's a penalty of 2 strokes. Ball moved when addressing the ball. Same thing. Your ball moves after you address it. You must put it back under a penalty of 1 stroke. If you don't put it back, you're playing from a wrong place. Remember that, then it becomes 2 strokes. Advice in line of play. It's the same circumstances in the fairway and rough as on the tee. You're allowed to get assistance on where hazards might be or yardages or things like that are just general knowledge. But in terms of asking people what club you should hit, how you should play the shot, etc., that incurs a penalty. See down here, you see this guy, looks like the hole's a bit of a dog leg. He has no idea where the hole is. Is someone allowed to show him the direction of where the hole is? Very good. Yes. So you would be the one you would be penalized, but the person that you were asking would not be penalized. They would only be penalized if they answered your question. Yes. I want to confirm this with the coaches, but I believe that you are. The rules are this is a little more geared toward individual stroke play, but in the case of when you're playing with your teammate in a high school match, you are certainly allowed to ask them advice on club selection. Yes. Yep. No. No, I don't think there are any spectators but if you have a caddy, you're entitled to have one. If you're playing in, let's say, a tournament that entitles you to have a caddy, then your caddy would be the person who is designated as the person that you could discuss club selection with, but that would be the only person. Yes. I think that it depends on the organization that you're playing in. Do you guys in high school match, you do allow GPSs? I know on the junior tour just recently we started allowing GPSs so long as they don't give any additional information such as wind and slope. So it sounds like you guys are able to use distance measuring devices, and the same rule applies that it can only measure distance. Provisional ball, lost ball. If you once again, we're coming back. Even if your ball is off the tee and it's in the fairway and you hit your next shot and it's in the fairway or rough and on that stroke you're not sure where your golf ball ended up, once again you're allowed to hit a provisional. Breaking and bending. You have to accept the lie as you find it. You are not permitted to move, bend, or break off anything growing or fixed before making a stroke in order to improve the lie of the ball, the area of stance or swing, or the line of play. Breach of this rule is a 2-stroke penalty. You will also incur a penalty of 2 strokes if you bend or break anything during a practice stroke that will give you an advantage when you're making your shot. So over here on the right, we have a cartoon of a guy with a chainsaw. Is he allowed to do that? Whoever said, yeah, you're in trouble. Yes.
When you say the swing is a line of play, does that mean you're not allowed to go, say, do 90 degrees to the tree, bump out of the fairway or something?
Well, if that's your line of play, if that's how you're going to proceed, right. So, your line of play could vary based on where you want to hit your shot. But if you are taking a stance and it's pretty obvious if you're trying to bend and break and really, the rules of golf are reasonable in that they try to help the player as much as possible. So if you're standing up against a tree, like, that's okay. But if you have to break 10 branches off to even get to the location, then that's not okay. Yes. That is not a penalty. Correct. It used to be. Well,
The answer is the question, if everybody didn't hear, is what if I'm taking a practice swing and I knock a leaf or a pine needle off of a tree? And unfortunately, the answer is it depends. It's kind of a question of fact of whether what you did improved your lie of ball, stance, or area of your intended swing. And there's a decision in the decisions book that says you could knock off one leaf, and that could in fact have improved your area of intended swing, and therefore you'd be subject to penalty. But there could be another situation where you could knock off a couple of leaves, but in fact it really didn't improve because there's still other things that are impeding your swing anyway. So it's a little bit vague, unfortunately, but it really just comes down to the fact of, did whatever you did in fact give you some advantage or improve your area of intended swing? The rule of thumb is just be really careful. When you hopefully you don't hit it into these areas where there's trees and junk and other stuff. I know I do more often than I would like, but we just had a rules workshop last week at the USGA, and we had a great instructor, and one of his sort of general suggestions or thoughts that I thought was a really good one was, if you keep both hands on the club when you're going into a bush or into a branch or whatever, it will sort of reduce the natural temptation or the natural instinct to want to, move something out of your way, or maybe put something, under, behind, or push something out of your way. So just generally when you're going into an area where you're going to be impeded by, again, bushes, branches, etc., you got to go in there as carefully. The rules want you to be able to play your ball, but you got to go in there as carefully as you can and not start, improving your ability to make the swing.
Any other? Yep, back there. That's a good question. Well, there's a few options. If you're able to identify it, then you may be able to take an unplayable from that position. But if you're not able to identify it, then you'd have to either play a provisional ball if you took one, or go back to the spot where you last played from under stroke and distance.
Did the provisional ball rule apply only to tee-offs?
No, provisional ball, this is what we were talking about before. You can hit a provisional ball anywhere unless you are virtually certain that it went into a hazard. Yes.
So let's say you hit your ball into like a tree or into a bush or something, and you know you hit in there, but for some reason you're unable to get to your ball, you're unable to like specifically identify it,
Mm-hmm.
but you're certain that you hit it there and that's your ball. Is that enough to take it unplayable from that location?
If you're taking it unplayable, you actually have to identify the golf ball. You can't just think it has to be in here. It might be. No, unfortunately, if you don't find the golf ball, then it's considered to be a lost ball. Only if you're 100% able to identify it. Any uncertainty, then you wouldn't be able to take it unplayable. All right. Question back there. Well, that's a good question. Is the ball at rest when he moves the ball, or is the ball in motion? The ball is at rest, then you are entitled to replace the ball where it was. And if you can't, if the ball is not easily replaceable, I don't know if you guys are, there's a great example, too bad I don't have it up, of Brad Fable hitting his shot on number 17 at TPC Sawgrass in the Players' Championship, probably about 10 years ago or more now. And a seagull came around, and do you guys know what the 17th hole at TPC looks like? It's the Island Green. And it's just an island green surrounded by water, and his ball was right on the green, and a seagull came along and picked it up and started flying off with it and dropped his ball right in the water, and he was able to replace his ball where it was with no penalty. Loose impediments. Leaves, twigs, stones, grass cuttings, and other natural objects can be moved without penalty in the fairway and rough. If the ball, however, moves as a result, you must put the ball back and you incur a penalty of 1 stroke. Sand and loose soil are only considered to be loose impediments when they're on the putting green, but not through the green. So you cannot move any sand or loose soil when you're in the fairway or in the rough, but you are entitled to do so on the putting green, and we'll go through that a little bit more later. And breach of this rule is 2 strokes. Yep. So is it your own ball? Then I believe that you would incur a penalty of 1 stroke, and you'd have to replace your ball as close as possible to the spot where it originally was. Just don't slip. It's a good rule of thumb in life, not just on the golf course. Sorry? No, I understand. I was just giving you a hard time. Yeah, it's the same thing. Just be careful out there. Don't fall. Movable obstructions. Bottles, cans, signs, stakes, anything other than out-of-bounds stakes or other artificial objects can be removed without penalty. If your ball moves as a result, you may replace it without penalty, even if your ball is lying in or on the obstruction. The obstruction can be moved. The ball is then to be dropped at its original position. So here we see this ball lying right up against the rake. Would I be allowed to mark my golf ball there? Yes or no? From a show of hands, who thinks yes? From a show of hands, who thinks no? The correct answer is yes. If you do mark your golf ball, then you are allowed to place it back in the exact spot, as close as possible to the exact spot of where it originally lay. If you don't mark your ball and it moves from that spot, then you have to drop it as close as possible to that spot. Immovable obstructions. Roads and other paths with artificial surface other than fixed artificial objects entitle you to free relief if they intervene with the ball's lie, your stance or your swing, but not just interfering with a line of play. To take relief, you locate the nearest point where you can take your stance and swing without interference from the obstruction and drop the ball within 1 club length. So over here we see this little cartoon. You know, it's a pretty big building right there. The guy is only entitled to 1 club length because there is no relief from his line of play. Yes, sir. I believe you would not.
Well, in that case, on the picture of the rake in the bunker there, what I would do is move the obstruction. Okay. Move the obstruction first and then see what happens. There's a chance you're going to move that movable obstruction, which you're entitled to do, and that ball may not move. It may stay right where it is. In that case, we've got no problems. If you move that obstruction and then the ball moves as a result, then there's no penalty and the player is required to replace their ball in that spot. Now, if you can't get it to stay at rest there, if you try to place it a second time, and it won't stay put and it's rolling back into that bunker, we're going to continue as nearly as possible in that area to find a place where it will stay at rest. But to answer your question, no, we're not. I can't think of a circumstance where you're going to end up having to play from that bunker. unless the ball was at rest and then subsequently moved into the bunker later. But in this case, you're entitled to the spot where the ball lay before you move the rake out of the way.
Like, what if it's on the side of a hill? There's a hill straight down, there's a bump at the bottom, and the rake is there, and it gets stuck away. There's no way to place it down.
Exactly, and that's the situation. Well, that's the situation we're going to keep on moving to the side. We're never going to go close to the hole, but we're always going to just kind of keep circulating our way out until we can find a place.
You have to mark the ball first before you move the rake.
Not necessarily. I don't think so, because if I'm standing right there, I know the spot. I mean, when we talk about knowing like the exact spot, we kind of get like pretty molecular in terms of, well, if we don't know right down to the and that's kind of the attitude that we should keep in doing this. But I think the rules allow you a little bit of leeway. I mean, within reason, if I'm standing there, I can say that's where it was. If I was standing 100 yards away and I saw someone else move it and then I walked up, chances are I can't say with quite as much certainty, so in that case I'd probably drop. But that's different scenario. Onward.
And that other picture, I thought it'd be a good example of immovable obstruction. That's actually a picture of the Freedom Tower under construction. That's actually one of my friend's brothers taking the swing, so it's a cool picture. I was trying to figure out a good place to put it in the slideshow. No, he wasn't actually hitting a golf ball, just taking a swing. Abnormal ground conditions. So we've talked a little bit about some of these terms before, but they include ground under repair, casual water, burrowing animal holes, grass pilings to be removed, and holes made by greenskeepers. If your ball is lying in one of the above-mentioned areas, or if you have to take your stance within one, you're given free relief. Find the nearest point where your ball is no longer within this area and where your stance is not within it, and drop the ball within one club length. So if my ball is not in the parameters of casual water, if there's a puddle out on the golf course, but my foot is in the casual water, am I entitled to relief? Good. If your ball is lost in an abnormal ground condition, you are given free relief, with the dropping point being where your ball last crossed the margin of the abnormal ground condition. So here we see a couple of pictures, a sign for ground under repair. It's often circled by a white line on the golf course. There's a little picture from Caddyshack. That's what an abnormal ground condition looks like when it's a burrowing animal hole. And over here on the right, I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a guy who has a water bottle that he's pouring on his golf ball to make that casual water. Is that in fact casual water? So he would not be entitled to relief from there. Yes?
So when you are, if you have to move it out and move it to the closest line, I guess, before it went out of bounds, are your feet allowed to be in?
Well, an abnormal ground condition is not out of bounds. So you would move it to the nearest point of relief, no closer to the hole. So sometimes that might just be one club, take a stance right over here. Sometimes you might have to move a good distance. If there's a huge puddle right in the middle of the fairway and there's no way around it and you got to go 30 feet to the right, you may have to go 30 feet to the right. But the key is to make sure that you're no closer to the hole, and that is the nearest area that you're capable of dropping it in. Doesn't matter if it's to the right, to the left. And it also is affected by whether you're a righty or lefty, because a nearest point of relief for a righty might be different than for a lefty. So wrong green. If your ball lands on the wrong green, you are not allowed to play it from there. So don't forget this. You must take free relief and go to the nearest edge of the green and going no closer to the hole and drop within one club length. This will usually be on the fringe. You are allowed to take your stance on the green, which is not on the green. So here, this is actually at the Barclays last year. Did anyone go to that tournament? It's at Ridgeway, New Jersey. See a couple hands up. So some of you might know that that course actually has more than one set of 18 holes. They were only playing one of the 18 holes that they have available there. But this was actually a green from one of the 9s that they were not using there. And a player didn't realize that he needed to take relief because it was still a wrong green, even though it was not on the same hole. It was not on the same golf course that they were playing. He was supposed to take relief, and he was penalized for not doing such. All right. If a ball is in a bad position, which is not explicitly dealt with by the rules, then there's nothing you can do about it. SOL. You must play the ball as it lies unless you declare it unplayable. So we see this bad lie over here, this divot, you got to play it. See those tire ruts? Unless it was casual water, you got to play it from there. Tiger looks upset over here about the lie that he got. Probably hit a perfect shot down the fairway and ended up in a divot. Just rub of the green. An unplayable ball, we were talking about that before. If a ball is in an extremely bad position, you have the right to declare the ball as unplayable. The player, only you are the one who decides that your ball is unplayable. So if one of your opponents thinks your ball is unplayable, one of your teammates thinks your ball is unplayable, your coach thinks your ball is unplayable, it doesn't matter. You are the only one who could decide that your ball is unplayable. There are 3 different options to take when taking a drop from an unplayable. You could take a drop within 2 club lengths of where your ball came to rest. You could take a drop on the backwards extension of the line from where your ball is to the hole. So if my ball is right over here and the hole is over here, let's say, I can go back as far as I want on this line. I can go 600 yards if I want, as long as it's on the extension of that line. Or you can choose to drop it where you played your last stroke from, under stroke and distance. Yes? I don't believe so. It's just if you have peer pressure that you need to take it unplayable, you actually don't have to. If you think you're capable of playing that shot from where the ball lies, then you can just play your shot from right there. If you take your drop and your ball ends up right back into a really bad position, that's just kind of tough luck. You just if you can't hit it, then you just need to take another unplayable. Yes. Uh-huh. That's a good question. Well, you can't take an unplayable lie out of a hazard. Yeah, it's only through the green. So. A wrong ball. So we were talking about before how important it is to make sure there's an identification mark on your golf ball. If you've played the wrong ball, this stroke does not count and you will incur a 2-stroke penalty. You must go back and play the original ball and replace the wrong ball. Strokes made with a wrong ball do not count. So it's just a 2-stroke penalty and you go back to where your ball was supposed to be played from. If you cannot find the correct ball, you must return to the place where you last played the correct ball from and drop it from there with another 1-stroke penalty. If you hole out with the wrong ball and do not rectify the mistake, the penalty is disqualification. All right? So just make sure you're playing the right ball. That's why it's so important. And the rules of golf give you the option to mark your ball, to lift it, to make sure that it's your ball. Make sure you take advantage of that. So a ball hits an outside agency. If your ball hits a tree, animal, or any other outside agency while it's in motion, you don't incur a penalty and the ball just plays as it lies. So we were talking about that animal before. If a squirrel comes running across the fairway and hits your ball while it's in motion, then you just must play your ball as it lies. Ball hits player or their equipment. If you yourself or your equipment, for example, your golf bag, you see this guy's golf bag over there, are hit by your ball, it's a 1-stroke penalty, and the ball must be played as it lies. So here, the bag's a little angry with the player for being hit with a golf ball. I'd be pretty angry too if I was hit with a golf ball. So, yes. If it hits someone else's equipment, then there's no penalty, and the ball must be played as it lies, unless you're in match play, which I don't want to confuse everyone. So, yes. If you're hit by someone else's ball, then it's no penalty to them or to yourself. All right, this is the example we were talking about before. Ball at rest moved by an outside agency. If your ball at rest is moved by an outside agency, for example, the seagull right there, which is about to dump this poor guy's golf ball into the water, you can put your ball back without penalty, and you can replace the ball if it is not retrievable. Once again, lost ball, same thing whether you're playing from the teeing ground or from the fairway. You have 5 minutes to look for it. If you can't 100% identify it within that time, then you have to take a penalty under stroke and distance. Striking the ball more than once. So if I take a swing and I'm in, let's say I'm trying to hit a flop shot and I'm in really thick rough and I take my shot and I kind of get under it and my ball hits the club 6 times in a row, how many strokes does that count as? So that stroke itself counts, and then how many additional strokes count? Correct. There is a 1-stroke penalty. Doesn't matter if you hit it 100 times, 200 times, 3 times. It is just a 1-stroke penalty for hitting your ball or hitting the club face more than one time when making a swing. So, in the bunker, the ball is classified as being in a bunker when any part of it is in this. If it touches the sand within it. Areas of grass within the bunker are not part of the bunker. So in that middle picture there, your stance is most likely going to be in the bunker. Is your ball in the bunker? Good. How about the ball on the left and the ball on the right? Are those balls in the bunker? Good. Once again, identifying the golf ball. In the bunker, you're entitled to do the same thing that you'd be able to do from the fairway or rough in identifying your ball. You see that example of the ball on the right, it's in a really bad fried egg. Probably can't identify just from looking at it if it is your golf ball. But you have the right, under the rules of golf, you must inform a fellow competitor and give them the opportunity to observe your procedure in doing this. And if you don't inform them, once again, it's a 1-stroke penalty. The ball is to be put back in the exact same spot, and the original ball has to be reproduced as accurately as possible. So let's pretend for a minute we are able to see that ball on the right there. Let's say we were not able to see that ball on the right, and we were virtually certain that that ball went in the bunker. So we're looking in the bunker a little bit and moving some sand to see if we can find the ball. And we find the ball is completely buried under the sand. Under the rules of golf, do we have to completely rebury the golf ball? Who thinks yes, who thinks no? Raise your hand for yes. Raise your hand for no. The correct answer is you do not have to completely rebury your golf ball. You are allowed to leave a little bit of your golf ball identifiable just so that you can see it. However, it does not have to be identifiable in your stance. So if someone standing 10 feet away from you is capable of seeing your golf ball, but you're not capable of seeing it in the stance that you're in, that ball is in play because it's capable of being seen at from another angle. I believe it'd be treated as a lost ball in that case. Yeah, and unfortunately, it happens more often than not. But one of the great things about the rules, even though you're not allowed to touch the sand at other times, if you're virtually certain that it's in the sand and you know the general area, you are allowed to probe forward and move some sand to see if you can find your golf ball. So that's within the rules to see if you can find it. So we were talking about over here the ball disappearing in the sand. Once again, if the ball's moved when addressing the ball, it has to be replaced under a stroke of 1 penalty. What would happen if the ball's not replaced? Anyone remember that penalty? And what's the phrase terms if you don't move your ball back? Wrong place. You may not touch or test the sand. The condition of the bunker is not to be tested by touching it with your club when taking practice swings, addressing the ball, taking a backswing, etc. You may rake the bunker so long as the sole purpose is to care for the course and is not in the line of play of your next shot. Breach to this rule is a 2-stroke penalty. So this is actually a newer rule. Not too long ago, you were not able to rake the trap when you entered. Now you are able to rake the trap, but solely for the purpose of caring for the golf course, which means to make sure that the golf course is in as good or better shape than you found it. as long as it's not in your line of play, because if it's in your line of play, then it may affect your next shot. Again, same thing with advice. If you're playing out of a bunker, it's the same rules. It doesn't matter where you are. You are allowed to ask where certain things are, any general knowledge questions, but you are not allowed to ask advice. Loose impediments in a bunker. This is a little bit different from loose impediments in the fairway and rough. Twigs, leaves, stones are not to be touched or removed before playing a stroke from the bunker. Breach of this rule is a 2-stroke penalty. So we see that pile of leaves to the right there. What if I'm virtually certain my ball's in that pile of leaves? Even though I'm not allowed to move loose impediments in the bunker, am I allowed to move those leaves in search for my golf ball? That's correct. You are allowed to move them, but your line must be recreated and the loose impediments must be put back. In the back. In the bunker, there's some local rules about stones being allowed to be removed in bunkers, but there's in the rules of golf book, you are not allowed to move stones in bunkers. Some places that have a lot of rocks give you the local rule that you are allowed to, and that's why it's so important to go over your rule sheet and listen to the rules that your coaches give you before you tee off. If you're really concerned, the only other option is to take it unplayable. I'm just going to go through a couple more slides here. We've done a lot of this stuff for the bunker, so I think it's important that we touch a couple other areas. We'll go into a water hazard now. So as we were talking about before, it has to be known or virtually certain that your ball is in the water hazard in order to take a drop from a water hazard. From yellow stakes, you have 3 different options. You can either play the ball as it lies, or you could take a drop on the backwards extension of the line from the hole to the entry point where the ball last crossed the margin of the hazard, or you can drop under stroke and distance at the site of your last stroke. Red stakes, you have those same options, but there are 2 additional rules that you can use to your benefit. You can drop within 2 club lengths of the point of entry where the ball last crossed the margin of the hazard, or you could take a drop 2 club lengths of the opposite side of the entry point where the spot on the opposite side of the lateral water hazard at the same distance from the hole. Does everyone understand that? Does anyone have any questions on that? Because it's a very common ruling out there. Got a lot of water on golf courses, unfortunately. Gets me into trouble all the time anyway. So this just goes through some of the other things that we've talked about with advice and line of play. Real quick, movable obstructions and hazards. You're not entitled to relief from movable obstructions and hazards, and you'd have to play it as you would as relief from the hazard itself. But one of the interesting things is if your ball does wind up on a bridge, you are entitled to, as a movable obstruction, you are allowed to ground your club in that area. And for immovable obstructions, it's the same as a bunker. You are not allowed to move any, for movable obstructions, you're not allowed to move anything inside of the water hazard, just like you're not allowed to do so inside the bunker. Same as with abnormal ground conditions in a hazard. The ball must be played as it lies, or it can be dropped outside the hazard, but you are not entitled to the same relief that you would have been under if your ball was in the fairway or rough through the green. So we went through a lot of this with out of bounds and provisional ball. If your ball is lying out of bounds, take a look at this diagram here. It's important to look at. So if any part of your ball is touching in bounds and the remainder of your ball is touching the line defining out of bounds, then your ball is in bounds if your ball is touching any part of the course that's in bounds. Once it's no longer touching any part that's in bounds, like that ball that's completely on the line, then your ball is deemed to be out of bounds. Again, let's talk about a provisional. If it looks like your ball might be going out of bounds, always a very wise idea to hit a provisional. That way, if it is out of bounds, you don't have to run back to the tee. You are allowed to stand out of bounds to play a ball which is not out of bounds. The There's no relief from immovable obstructions and abnormal ground conditions that lie out of bounds, though. So we talked about playing a provisional ball. Again, remember how important it is to say you're hitting a provisional ball. If you don't say that you're hitting a provisional ball, then that ball becomes the ball in play, and if you find your original ball, tough luck. Yes?
So if you're at an out-of-bounds state, consider the boundary of the course,
Mm-hmm.
is that considered an immovable obstruction? You want to use that if
You are not allowed to move an out-of-bounds stake. You are allowed to move a stake for a lateral water hazard or a water hazard, but not defining the out-of-bounds. So here's a guy that's just mad. He hit a terrible drive, just hits another one, totally forgot to announce that he was hitting a provisional, and that's now his ball in play. You may play your provisional ball until it passes the point where your original ball is believed to be, so that's important. So let's say you hit a big drive out to the right, 300 yards, and you're not sure you're going to find it, so you play a provisional ball, and your next shot you hit, you don't hit it as well, it's only 200 yards, but it's down the middle. You are allowed to play that ball until it passes the point where your original ball is believed to be. We talked about the 5-minute rule. If you find your original ball within 5 minutes and it's inbounds, you must continue play with that ball. If your original ball is lost or out of bounds, the provisional ball becomes the one in play, and all strokes played with the original ball and the provisional ball count in addition to a 1-stroke penalty. So going through quickly, when your ball's on the green, you guys see this middle diagram here where the ball's kind of half touching the green, half touching the fringe? Are you entitled to mark that golf ball? Raise your hand if you think no. Raise your hand if you think yes. If any part of your golf ball is touching the green, then you are classified as on the green and are allowed to mark your golf ball. It's recommended that you use a coin or a circular object to mark your ball, although it is not a penalty to use something else. If your ball is accidentally moved in the act of marking it or replacing the ball, it may be replaced, no penalty. Same thing as if you're repairing the green. If you have a ball mark, which is very important to always make sure you repair your ball marks, and your ball marker moves, then it is no penalty and the marker just needs to be replaced. You're not allowed to test the surface of the green by rolling a ball or roughening the surface. You are not allowed to improve your line of putt by touching it. The only thing you may repair on your line of putt are pitch marks and old hole plugs. Here we see this guy over here vacuuming some loose impediments. And as we said before, sand and soil are loose impediments on the green, and that's the only place that you will find them to be loose impediments on the golf course. Lost gloves, scorecards, other artificial objects can be removed on the green without penalty. If the ball moves, you may put it back without penalty. Relief from a sprinkler head is only given if it interferes with a player's stance or swing, but not from the line of shot off the green. So over here on the left, we see that ball that has the sprinkler head between the ball and the hole. If I decide to use a putter and it's not interfering with my stance or my swing, am I entitled to relief? That's correct. You are not entitled to relief from there just because it interferes with your line of play. If the sprinkler head is off the green, you're not entitled to relief. Yes. If the ball lands on the sprinkler head, then you are entitled to relief. Yes.
Let's say you and your opponent are both on the fringe or on the fairway range of the green.
Mm-hmm.
Your ball is directly in front of their ball. Are you allowed to mark it so that they putt, or pitch like this?
Yes, you are allowed to mark it so it doesn't is the ball?
The ball's off, like on the fringe or off the green.
If the ball is off the green and there's another ball that's interfering with that's on or off the green. If the one in front of it is off the green and it's not interfering with his right, the fellow competitor has to. You're allowed to do that, but you have to request it to your fellow competitor or opponent.
You don't decide that your ball's interfering with someone else. They do, and they request that you mark and lift it, and then you do, and then you would.
So, yes.
Just to confirm, there's no like club rules in terms of if you're right off the green, you have to use a chip shot.
You're allowed to use whatever club you have in your bag as long as it's one of your 14 clubs in play. No problem. Once again, we see a picture here of casual water. If you're in casual water on the green, you are allowed to drop it at your nearest point of relief. What happens if your nearest point of relief is off the green? Are you allowed to drop it off the green if your ball is on the green? How many? Raise your hand. How many think yes? How many think you're not allowed to drop it off the green? The correct answer is you are allowed to drop it off the green if that's your nearest point of relief. If you're putting on the green and your ball hits the flagstick or the person attending it is in the hole or not, whether the ball, attending it, whether it is in the hole or not, you would incur a 2-stroke penalty and you play for the following stroke from where it lies. Note there is no penalty for hitting an unattended flagstick from off the green. If your ball is wedged between the flagstick, like we see on this picture here on the right, has this ball been holed? Yes or no? Raise your hand, yes. Raise your hand for no. It looks to me like the top of the ball is still outside of the hole, so the ball has not been holed. When you remove the flagstick, you want to make sure you do so very carefully, and if the ball falls into the hole, then it has been holed. If when you lift it out of the flagstick, you do it rough, and it flies away 10 feet from the hole, then unfortunately you have to place your ball back on the lip of the hole and then take another stroke to complete the hole. Or possibly more, but let's hope that if you have a tap in, it only takes you 1 stroke. Again, we were talking about outside agencies before. If your ball is moved, once it's come to rest, you can replace it. Now here's an interesting question. We were talking about hitting the ball on the wrong green before. You see in this picture on the right, this is actually a shared green. It's a little bit tough to tell, but there's one flagstick that's to the left, and then there's another flagstick that's to the right, and it's actually the same green that's shared for 2 different holes. If my ball comes to rest at the hole or closer to the hole that I'm not currently playing, do I have to take relief from that green as a wrong green? How many think yes? How many think that I have to play the ball as it lies since it's a shared green? That is correct. You must play the ball as it lies because it's a shared green. All right, this is very important. In stroke play, strokes cannot be conceded. There are no gimmies. I know it's much more fun to play on Saturday and Sunday when Dad's saying, yeah, that's good, or you're out there with your buddies. If a player picks up his ball by mistake, he will incur a penalty of 1 stroke and he must put it back. Failure to put it back if you tee off on the next hole, penalty is disqualification, so make sure you do that. There's a picture of Tiger Woods and his old caddy, and he's not taking a stroke there, so they're not in breach of any rules. But if Tiger was taking a stroke and Steve Williams was assisting him from the elements, that would be a penalty under 2 strokes. Yes. Right. If it's a shared green, there's very rare circumstances. It mostly occurs overseas, to be honest with you. If you're playing golf in Scotland or Ireland, then you're probably going to come across a couple of shared greens. You're not going to come across too many shared greens in the metropolitan area. So if it's one big green that's shared between 2 holes, that's where you wouldn't drop it. That's where you'd have to play it as it lies. All right. Sorry to rush through the last couple slides. I know that you guys got to get home for dinner at some point, but
if I can real quick, I always like to when we talk about all this stuff, obviously these rules of golf can be pretty confusing, pretty lengthy, but I feel like it's really important. The idea here is not for you to be trying to call an infraction on your opponent. And likewise, the idea is not for you to try to get away with something. This isn't the NBA where if you can get an Oscar for flopping and they'll call a charge, then, good for you. You got one by on the officials. That's kind of not what golf's all about. The reason that these rules are so long and confusing is a really, really strong effort by the people that write them just to try to be fair. And so that's the idea that I think you need to have when you're playing in a golf competition, is that the rules are, yeah, they're long and yeah, they're confusing, but the ultimate point is just to try to be fair. So, we'd love to have you learn as much as you can here, but if you go away with anything, it's just if you avoid sort of the appearance of evil, so to speak, if you let common sense prevail, more often than not, you're probably going to be okay. And the idea, again, is not to follow your opponent around and try to see an infraction, or the idea is not where if you see your own ball, if you caused your ball to move, it's not to look around and say, did anybody see that? That's what makes golf such a great game. That's what makes all of us as golfers such special and great people, is because when we do something that we know is an infraction, we raise our hand and say, guys, I got a problem. We got to tell the coaches, or we got to report this, because, it's our integrity, and we are our own, as I think Dan probably said at the beginning, we are our own referees and we are our own officials out there. So if we can leave you with anything at all, I think that would be it. And like I said, if common sense prevails and you're trying to avoid, the appearance of evil, you're probably, in most cases, gonna do just fine. So have a great season, you guys, and thanks. And if you have any questions, for Dan or myself, we can take some now, or if you'd rather kind of break, and we'll just hang around and see you up here. And I'm sure that Dan wants to give you some prizes too before everybody goes. So.
Coaches, do we have time for some questions, or? All right. Sorry. Got a lot of questions. Let's start over here. Uh-huh. Usually, my guess would be that there's a local rule at that club stating that the clubhouse would probably be out of bounds or would not be. If there were no clear markings and it wasn't on the rule sheet, then probably you would proceed as if it were in play and take relief as an immovable obstruction. More questions, guys? So we talked about before.
You actually answered your own question. And
you did.
Really, really good job doing it.
So how long? Remember we talked about earlier. How long do you have to search for your golf ball?
What did you say? You said technically what? Technically, you finished the hole. That's it. That's it. What's that? You mean? No, because you
finished the hole.
You holed out. The hole's over.
We'll do. Do we have more questions? We'll get.
Have a line for prizes.
Sure. Any more? Over here. We got a lot of good questions today. Yep, that's actually gone over in the rules book. And if your opponent is cheating, the penalty is disqualification. Or in any way going out of their way to your detriment as well. Well, if it's obvious that they responded, then they would get the penalty. But if they didn't respond, then they wouldn't get the penalty, and only you would get the penalty. I mean, even if the intent is there and they somewhat answer the question, then that to me, the intent in and of itself, whether it's a gesture or word spoken, would classify as giving advice. Prizes? All right. The lines. The lines are what take precedence. or as it says in the rules book, the stakes identify, the lines define.
If there are only stakes, then you're going to use those stakes to create a line. But if there are stakes and lines, the reason for that is from the tee. If you didn't know there was a hazard there, the stakes just kind of, as Dan said, identify so that you're aware that it's there, but then to actually know whether you're in or not is based on the line on the ground.
Coaches think they're leaving at 5:30, so whatever you want to do.
What's that?
speed it up.
What's that? Okay. Okay. Got another question up here.
So you were talking a lot about going back for your ball, going to the position.
Yep.
But in reality, in high school golf, to maintain pace of play, is that really
There is no exception to that rule in the rules book. If the high schools decide to make a local rule that to almost play it as a hazard, if you will, that their prerogative is the committee, but it's not within the rules of golf. If you can't find your ball, and I grew up playing on the weekends and thought I could find my ball and couldn't. There's no possible way of going back to the tee, but so I think that I know that a lot of coaches were planning for departure at 5:30, so I want to make sure everyone here gets some prizes. If you are staying a little bit longer, me and Jeff will be around, so please feel free to come up to one of us. If you have any questions about our program or any of the rules, your coaches also know how to get in touch with us, so you're welcome to anytime. And thanks so much for being here and being a part of this today.
One prize each. One prize
And guys, one prize each, okay?
or else you're disqualified.
Yep, penalty is DQ.